The Taliban have seized the eastern Afghan city of Jalalabad as they continue their rapid advance towards Kabul, the only major city still under government control. It follows the capture of the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif. Haiti's been hit by a strong aftershock just hours after a major earthquake killed more than 300 people. The Prime Minister says there's extensive damage and has declared a month-long state of emergency. The Red Cross in Lebanon says at least 20 people have been killed and nearly 80 injured in a fuel tanker explosion in the north of the country, which imports all of its fuel. Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, has begun a statewide lockdown as the Premier warns of difficult months ahead. 48 people have died in this current outbreak, with tighter restrictions coming into play for COVID breaches.
20 years of war, 2,312 American service members killed, and many, many more left with life-changing injuries. They fought to keep Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven for the kind of terror attack that struck America on September 11, 2001. They also fought to try to make Afghanistan a stable democracy capable of defending itself. And now, before the eyes of the world, much of whatever was gained on the ground in Afghanistan has unraveled. Overnight, the Taliban seized Jalalabad, leaving Kabul as the only remaining major city not under insurgent control. And this morning, this image, eerily reminiscent of the fall of Saigon, a U.S. Chinook helicopter flying near the embassy. American diplomats have been instructed to destroy sensitive documents, electronic equipment, and even images of the American flag that could be used as propaganda. Smoke seen near the embassy roof as the evacuation gets underway. Yesterday, the president announced he's authorized additional troops, totaling 5,000, to help evacuate Americans and some of the Afghans who worked with the U.S. President Biden also said he's warned the Taliban that anything they do that puts U.S. personnel at risk will be met with a swift and strong U.S. military response. It's a mess, to be sure. But in his statement yesterday, President Biden said it's a situation he inherited from his predecessors, saying, quote, "I was the fourth president to preside over an American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I would not and will not pass this war on to a 5th." This morning, there are deep concerns about the lives at stake, the long-term security implications for the United States, and America's standing in the world. We'll take all of that to Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Martha Raddatz, who traveled to Afghanistan in June, is also standing by. But we begin this morning live in Kabul with ABC senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell. Ian, what's the latest?
Yeah, John, good morning. I have to say, been covering this war for 20 years. I was here on the day that the Taliban fled, and then it was a mood of celebration, of liberation, women throwing back the burqa, men cutting off their beards, and a sense of hope and optimism about the future. Now, the streets are dead. We hear the sound of helicopters overhead, but otherwise there's a real climate here of fear and dread about what the future holds. Fear and desperation here in Afghanistan as the Taliban almost completes its stunning and swift advance, taking over more than 2/3 of the country. Jalalabad, among the latest to fall. Video released by the Taliban appears to show their troops being welcomed by local crowds. The militants' rapid advance cutting off the capital to the east.
We are certainly concerned by the speed with which the Taliban has been moving.
It's Kabul where US troops have begun arriving this weekend for an emergency evacuation of most US embassy staff and some Afghans who've worked for the US.
This is not abandonment. This is not an evacuation.
And as the 9/11 anniversary approaches, some are warning Afghanistan could become a safe haven for extremism once more.
If we end up with a scenario where state fractures and you end up essentially with a security vacuum, then there's absolutely ideal conditions for international terrorism and violent extremism to prosper yet again.
And the hard-won freedoms of women and girls likely to be stripped away. This displaced schoolteacher says she watched girls lashed by the Taliban just for wearing sandals. The hope of a better future now turning to despair as the fundamentalists continue their staggering offensive. Not abandonment, not evacuation. It's exactly those things here on the ground. We hear the constant sound of Chinooks ferrying people out to the airport as they're desperate to get out the country. But the bewildering pace of events has caught everyone off guard, and that's why we're seeing thousands of extra US troops here. The Taliban are on the outskirts of the city. We're even seeing reports of some clusters of fighters inside the city. But the Taliban, interestingly, they've played a political master game. They've issued a statement ordering their fighters not to come into the city. They've sent a delegation already this morning to the presidential palace, and another delegation is going to go to Doha, meet with Taliban leaders and discuss an interim government. Even the government here is now talking about some kind of negotiated peaceful settlement. That will be a relief to the people here. But again, the climate here is one of not knowing what on earth is going to happen and that everything is lost.
Begin with Afghanistan and the dramatic fall of the capital. Just today, President Biden sending more troops, a total of 6,000 now, to speed up the emergency evacuation of embassy staff and some Afghans who helped the U.S., such as interpreters and their families. The White House releasing this photo of the president being briefed on the developments on the ground. Helicopters and black smoke visible. American diplomats, including the ambassador, evacuated to the airport. At least 500 staff leaving the country so far. The embassy shuttered, the flag coming down. Secretary of State Blinken declaring to ABC's Jonathan Karl, this is manifestly not Saigon. These images from Al Jazeera claim to show Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace. Earlier today, the president of Afghanistan fled the country, saying he chose to avoid bloodshed. Thousands of Afghans now scrambling to get out. The Kabul airport packed earlier today. We have team coverage. ABC's Martha Raddatz, Rachel Scott standing by. But we begin with our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, who leads us off tonight from Kabul.
Tonight, the Taliban taking Kabul, Afghanistan's capital and last government stronghold. This footage from Al Jazeera purporting to show Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace declaring the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, marking the end of a 20-year experiment of democracy and the stunning completion of the militants' dramatic takeover, seizing nearly all of the country in just over a week. Earlier, there were skirmishes and panic at the city's airport. The Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, fleeing as the Taliban closed in, saying in a Facebook message he wanted to save Kabul from bloodshed. Smoke rising over the US embassy, Chinook helicopters taking off, evacuating US personnel from the country, and eerily reminiscent of the fall of Saigon.
This is manifestly not Saigon. The fact of the matter is this. We went to Afghanistan 20 years ago with one mission in mind, and that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And that mission has been successful.
The Biden administration defending the US withdrawal from the country, but clearly caught off guard by the Taliban's rapid advance. Just today, President Biden sending more troops, a total of 6,000, to hasten the emergency evacuation of the embassy and some Afghan visa applicants. Today, the flag removed, the doors shuttered, the US ambassador and all operations transferred to the airport for safety. Embassy staff told to destroy sensitive equipment and documents, especially those containing images of the American flag that could be used as propaganda. And on the streets of Kabul, fear and despair. Long lines as residents scramble to withdraw their life savings, many saying the banks simply running out of cash. And a desperate crush at the Pakistan border crossing as people try to flee. And chaos at the airport as thousands of Afghans desperate to get out. Just 5 weeks ago, this was President Biden, adamant that what we witnessed today wouldn't happen.
The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
But tonight, the worst predictions for Afghanistan's future coming true. In less than 3 months, the Taliban capturing control of nearly every major district outside Kabul. Just this morning, taking the city of Jalalabad before advancing on the capital. This video, released by the Taliban, claiming to show their forces being...
We start with the latest news from Afghanistan. President Ashraf Ghani has left the capital, Kabul. Taliban forces have reportedly reached Kabul after taking control of as many as 30 of the country's 34 provincial capitals. Afghan National Reconciliation Council head Abdullah Abdullah tweeted that the president was heading to Tajikistan. Afghanistan's interior minister said preparations are in place for a peaceful transfer of power to a transitional government. Taliban forces were reportedly surrounding all entrances to Kabul on Sunday. They said in a statement that they ordered their fighters to prevent looting. Because security forces had left parts of the capital, Taliban forces were going to prevent chaos. The Taliban took control of nearly all of Afghanistan in just over a week. The United States is due to withdraw its forces from the country by the end of this month. Senior U.S. officials say the plan remains unchanged. The United States and other countries are evacuating their embassies. Many people in the capital and embassy staff are trying to flee. People are lining up at the airport to get international flights. Now to an update on torrential rains here in Japan. A front is lingering over the country, bringing heavy rain to parts of the west and the Pacific side of the east. Weather officials are warning of more landslides and flooding. The front has brought record-breaking rainfall to parts of western and central Japan since last week. At some locations, the precipitation recorded during the past 5 days was more than 3 times the average monthly rainfall in August. It has caused major rivers to overflow. The water levels of many rivers remain high. A landslide buried 5 people in the city of Okaya, Nagano Prefecture, early Sunday morning. 2 of them were rescued and 3 were later confirmed dead.
It felt like the whole house was shaking. I looked through the upstairs window and saw a neighbor's house hit by water and collapse.
Rescuers are searching for 2 people who went missing in another landslide in Nagasaki Prefecture. A woman died at the site. In the city of Hiroshima, mud and sand flowed into a residential area. Residents and firefighters were busy cleaning up.
The mud has come into my house up to my knees. It's a real mess. I thought I might have to flee at any moment.
Weather officials forecast that the front will continue to hover near Japan through Friday. They say it could bring heavy rain to wide areas on Monday and Tuesday. They are calling on people in hazardous zones to stay on alert for more landslides and flooding. Officials in Tokyo have confirmed more than 4,000 new cases of the coronavirus. That's the highest ever figure for a Sunday. The daily tally rose more than 200 from a week ago. The number of seriously ill COVID-19 patients in the capital increased to 251, hitting a record high for the 6th day in a row.
The number of positive tests is very high. Serious cases are also increasing. The situation is just like a disaster.
New infections are also increasing in Tokyo's neighboring prefectures. The daily tally for Chiba hit a record high for the 3rd day in a row. The surge is putting a strain on the medical system. A record 1,563 COVID-19 patients are in serious condition across Japan. Infected people with mild or no symptoms are isolating themselves at hotels or in their homes. More than 20,000 people are recuperating at home in Tokyo. If their condition worsens, it could take days to find a hospital that will accept them. Across Japan, authorities reported more than 17,000 infections on Sunday. A coronavirus state of emergency remains in effect in Tokyo and 5 other prefectures through the end of August. Japanese textiles have a worldwide reputation for excellence, but many companies have moved their production abroad to reduce labor costs. And this has led to a steep drop in the number of young people entering the industry in Japan. Now, some textile artisans are working to enroll younger workers to carry on their business using social media platforms.
The Kojima district of Okayama Prefecture is famous as a center for producing jeans and other denim items.